guys, this is Sarivel again and practice of Kloud4 Academy. So I'm going to cover course number 3, which is Node.js microservice. So this is a syllabus, Node.js features and Node.js services. Plus we will be covering the DevOps. So as part of this course, Node.js will be covering monolithic architecture, what is a traditional architecture, why we are migrating to modernization architecture like microservice architecture, and what are the advantages of microservices, and then what are the disadvantages of microservices, where the microservice will fit our requirement and where we have to use, where we should not use, and what are the microservice design patterns and principles and how we can use that, and what is SOA, service oriented architecture, what is the difference between microservice and service oriented architecture, why we are moving from service SOA to microservice architecture. And then we talk about serverless architecture. We will covering this session serverless architecture using Lambda. We will calling the S3 bucket and we will push read write call using Node.js. Like that we will be connecting DynamoDB using AWS Lambda via API gateway and reading through DynamoDB using Node.js. So here the Docker, we will be cover what is Docker, how to build a Docker image, how to push to Docker Hub, and how to run the images, Node.js images in our local. And Kubernetes is a cluster, right? Cluster setup using single cluster setup. We will be setting the Minikube using Minikube in our local and writing the Kubernetes script, deployment script, and deploying our microservices in Minikube. And then we will be covering Node.js microservices. We build that sample microservices which we build using Docker and Node.js microservice, and then deploying into Kubernetes. So that we will be covering. And then Docker demo, we will covering all the demo session, and Kubernetes demo, all the how services of Kubernetes, how to use. We will execute all the Kubernetes commands in the demo, and we will show that. And then Node.js event-driven architecture, how we can use using Kafka, how we can implement in Node.js. We will be covering as a demo. So all this session we will be covering the live demo, and possible we will ask the students set up their system in their system, and we will ask them to set up, and we will bring them up to the speed. And then this is Node.js introduction and Node.js how to set up the Node.js application, and what is the Node.js basics we will be covering, and we will simultaneously we will ask them to set up in our local, and so that you can get to know what is happening. And then we will how to install node npm third party and Node.js other features like template engine, routers, how to. So all those things we will be set up in the demo session, and we will be covering that with an examples. And MVC pattern, model view controller, how we can implement in Node.js, we will be covering that. And Express.js, what is the purpose of Express.js, why you are using Express.js. We will install Express.js and we will with the example, and we will show the demo. And validation, error handling, how we can do in Node.js, we will be covering. And SQLize, how we can implement let's say MongoDB, and how we can integrate, and how we can fire the MongoDB queries and read write queries and connecting that and pushing the data. So that is a SQLize integration. There's a Mongoose integration, that's called NoSQL ORM. And then ORM means it's a SQLize, that's object relational database like SQL database. Mongoose is a NoSQL database like MongoDB. REST API, how do we implement REST API in Node.js. On cookie session, how do we cover with the example where we have to use cookie session in Node.js. And Node.js asynchronous process, how do we implement, so we'll be covering up. And Node.js microservice, we build that, and which is connecting to S3 bucket and read write access and delete, and also DynamoDB read write from Node.js. We build a Node.js microservice using Docker and Kubernetes, and then deploying into AWS using EKS. So that demo we will be showing finally. So all these things we will be covering as part of this course. Plus we will be covering the DevOps. We already discussed it, right? DevOps is every course we will be covering. The DevOps is a additional part which we will be covering, like Jenkins, introduction of Jenkins, CI/CD pipelines in Jenkins, how to create, how to build and deploy into AWS using Kubernetes script, and then create Docker file, Docker compose, CI/CD pipelines like code commit, code build, code pipeline, how to automate that, how do we packaging the code and deploying into AWS. And then Jenkins master slave setup in AWS. What is the advantage of it? You can use multi-strategy, multi-branching strategy, multi-branch and multi-build strategy, and how we can create a git commit, git repository, push the code. We'll be covering everything, and then finally we cover blue-green deployment, how we can do in AWS Lambda, like deployment description. So these things we'll be covering as part of this course, Node.js course number 3.